Last year, I was blessed to introduce one of those giants, Ken Manny of Michigan State, and I can't believe 2 years in a row, now I get to introduce a second one. Mike Boyle is one of the foremost educators in the area of performance training, personal training, and athletic rehabilitation. Coach Boyle has been involved in training and rehabilitation with a wide range of athletes, including stars in every professional sport. Coach Boyle has also served as a consultant to some of the top teams in the NFL, NHL, as well as numerous Division I athletic programs. Boyle has been involved in Olympic gold medal efforts in both women's soccer, women's ice hockey, and as the current strength conditioning coach for the United States women's national ice hockey team. In 2012, Coach Boyle was named strength conditioning consultant to the Boston Red Sox, and in 2013, a World Series winner. From 1991 to 1999, Coach Boyle served as a strength conditioning coach for the Boston Bruins, and from 1983 to 2012, served as a strength conditioning coach at Boston University. Coach Boyle.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, start my timer, get the slides up, and get this show on the road. That's the nerve-wracking part, standing there and getting introduced. This is the second nerve-wracking part, hoping that the slides come up the way they're supposed to, and they're going nice and slow. I'm going to unplug that and plug it back in. How's that? And we'll see if we can. I'd hate to have to do this from memory. That would be. Okay, so I'm going to wander around up here so I can see my slides, so I can see you first. The title, What Every Athlete Needs, starts with why. And I think that's what we want to talk. We're going to talk a lot about why. Why do we do the things that we do? And I think I can hopefully frame that for you. This is extremely true. There are two types of speakers, those that are nervous and those that are liars. I've been doing this for a really long time, and I'm still squirming in my shoes. My palms are sweating when I'm getting introduced to an audience like this because, this is a real peer group. And in age, there's certainly some people that are older than me. I told Dwayne I was going to give him a hard time. I have athletes here that are going to be 50 years old, people that I was their college strength coach. So that's when you start really feeling old. But I am nervous, but I get over it really fast, which is good. So thanks. Simon Sinek, start with why. There'll be a bunch of books that I talk about. Write down, there's a list of books at the end, but write down, reading is good. We'll start right with that. The more you read, there'll be no bad reading that you can do. I want to thank Chris Poirier and Perform Better. Obviously, Chuck, Ethan Reeve, who called and asked me to do this, I was just saying that that's a really good idea for them because it's very hard to have a guy like Ethan call you and say, would you like to come and speak? The answer is basically, yes, I would like to come and speak. Thank you. So, he's a guy that I have a huge amount of respect for the work that he's done. So it makes it very easy. And obviously, all my former interns, employees, players, assistants, because, this was like a reunion yesterday for me. It was awesome to be here and see people, like I said, that I coached as players and people that were, Glenn was my first, I think, real intern. And there's a whole bunch of people here. So that's all we did all day was talk to people. I have 45 seconds per slide, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. There's got a lot of stuff. That's what we said. I'm not going to spend a lot of time except take a look at strengthcoach.com. Listen to the Strength Coach podcast. As I said, get smarter. That's a really good idea. Read, listen, use your time wisely, okay? That's my email address. I answer every email that I get. If you're a pain in the ass, I'll tell you you're a pain in the ass and stop emailing me. But basically, if you have a legitimate question about the presentation, email me and say, hey, what about this? And I will try to get you an answer. Those are my kids right after the World Series. I'm really proud of my kids. I love them, obviously. Why am I here? That guy up there, I guess on your left, that's my father. So my father was a Hall of Fame football player at Boston University, ended up being a basketball coach, won a bunch of state championships in basketball. That's actually taken, you can see the TVs, that was taken in a bar in Malden, Massachusetts, where the picture was hanging of his 1960 championship team. So I was born literally into this. I've been going to practice for as long as I can remember. I can remember 10 years ago, we went to do a talk at a high school, and I had to walk through the halls of the high school at night when all the lights were turned off. And I had an amazingly good feeling. I was like, this is awesome. Because all we used to do when we were little was we'd go to Saturday practices and we'd run around the hallways when the lights were off. So you realize, this was something that I really always wanted to do. Obviously, in the intro, Coach talked about, I've been lucky enough to be involved in a lot of different stuff. So I've had a really broad range of experiences in terms of the types of teams. I got to work with this women's national team, to work with this 91 group, to work with Mia Hamm and Julie Foudy and Brandy Chastain and all those girls was really like an incredibly cool experience. I was lucky enough to get 2 national championship rings in ice hockey. I was lucky enough to get a gold medal and unfortunately a silver medal. So 98 we got a gold, and then I worked with them again in 2010 and we missed by about an inch, literally. That is not a photo bomb. That's someone's picture that they took off a TV, right? They just took a shot of their TV, but I was lucky enough I might be the luckiest man in baseball, and there'll be guys, I don't know if Bob Alejo's roaming around here, but he'll tell you that I am, because I worked in baseball 2 years and got a World Series ring, which there's guys that have been doing it for 20 years and haven't done it, so luck counts. Be in the right place at the right time. I invented combine training, because it says so in the book, Coach, that's why. So Pete Williams said I did, so as far as I'm concerned, I did. That's legit, Rob, right? It's in a book. Yeah, it's written down. But this is really important, especially there's a lot of young people I see. You know, I'm getting old one, like I said, I got players that are 50, not 49. Dwayne was like, don't call me 50, so he's 49. But when I got to Boston University, the basketball coach was Rick Pitino. Okay? His assistant, or one of his assistants, was John Custer. His assistant was Steve Clifford. Our point guard on Rick Pitino's team was Brett Brown, who's now the 76ers coach. When I was at BU with football, Tony Sperano was the offensive line coach. He ended up coaching the Dolphins. My roommate at Springfield College for a semester was Steve Spagnuolo, who ended up coaching the LA Rams, right? Joe Sacco, actually is now the Bruins assistant, was the Colorado coach 2 years ago. Mike Sullivan, one of my other players, was the Boston Bruins coach. The point being, you don't know who you're working with, okay? Treat everybody like they're going to be the most important person in your career, because they might be the most important person in your career. And you may not know it. It may just be some guy that, hey, you know, he's the lowliest assistant on the football staff, could very well end up being an NFL head coach someday. And I will tell you that because, I mean, I literally have no idea. I'm amazed at how these things have transpired. Talk about getting lucky. Rusty Jones, Mike Wojcik, and that's Bill Starr, the late. We just unfortunately lost a great guy, but I was not lucky enough to work with Bill Starr, but when I got to Springfield College, the year before I got there, weight training was like Nautilus, how to raise the seat, how to get your shoulder lined up with the axis of rotation. That year, a graduate student named Bruce Buckby came from University of Hawaii from Bill Starr with Strong Shall Survive in his hand, and he taught the weight training class. So when all of a sudden you're a sophomore at Springfield College, and when you walk into the weight training class, again, I didn't know who Bill Starr was. I didn't know who Bruce Buckby was. When I walked into my dorm, that guy in the middle was greeting me when I walked into my dorm. Mike Wojcik was my dorm director at Springfield College, the longest tenured guy in the National Football League to date, I do believe. And I walked in there, and Mike Wojcik I remember his room had everything I needed. He had every Strength and Health, every Muscle and Fitness, every Ironman magazine in boxes, all cataloged. He had beer, and he had oldies records. I was like, this is where I'm going to be as long as he'll let me hang out in his room, which we did a lot. And Rusty Jones was a grad student then, coaching football. Luck, blind-ass luck. Read Outliers. You know, you talk about why did some things happen. I don't know why some things happen. But it's happening to you right now. You just might not know it. You know, Joe Ehrman, if you ever read Inside Out Coaching, if you haven't read Inside Out Coaching yet. Really, really good book. But he talks about the 20-year window. You won't know what you did for 20 years. And suddenly 20 years later, you'll be walking around like I am here, seeing your former players and your former interns in there. They've got great jobs and great families and great lives, and you think, wow, I had a little piece of that. I had a little part of that. So I don't want to editorialize too long. Even players' kids. Someone came up to me one day and said, man, you know Kyrie Irving. And I was like, who's Kyrie Irving? I said, that's the kid from Duke, right? And they were like, yeah, you know his dad. I was like, I do? They said, yeah, his dad's the all-time leading scorer at BU in basketball. And I said to Dwayne, I'm like, Frederick Irving is old enough to have an 18-year-old kid? But I didn't know it. Dwayne's son plays tailback at Notre Dame. Dwayne told me that the Teague brothers in the NBA, or Sean Teague, are off guard with Brett Brown. Those are his two kids. So again, you just don't know. You have no idea what's going on right now in your career. That's the editorial part. Now here's the presentation. I know you were talking about quotes, Coach, but I love this quote. The problem isn't information overload, it's filter failure. Okay? You got to be able to filter. You've got to be able to think. That's why we're going to talk about this whole idea of why. Why are we doing the things that we're doing? So if we look, another good quote, any fool can make something complicated. It takes a genius to make it simple. If someone can't explain to you what they're doing, they don't know what they're doing. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's building something, if it's strength and conditioning. If they can't explain it to you, they don't know what they're doing. This is really important. There's what you know, and then there's what you can implement. Sometimes the two are very, very different things. That was really good for me when I went to Major League Baseball. Because I went to Major League Baseball, and I was like, I know a lot. I don't think I'm going to pull a lot of it off here. And you got to know the difference. And not knowing the difference can get you fired in our field. So make sure you know the difference. This is also very important. Common sense is not very common. Please, and this is my appeal to strength and conditioning coaches today, don't make an ass of yourself on YouTube, please. It hurts our profession when we get crazy Eddie, screaming at somebody. Thank you, coach. I appreciate that. But that's the truth. I look at some of that shit and I'm embarrassed as a professional to see what some people who purport to be strength and conditioning coaches do on these stupid YouTube videos. But as we said, common sense is not very common. I'll tell you, in that 20-year window, you may wish you could go and make YouTube disappear because you're trying to convince somebody that you're a professional and they click on that video and they're like, seriously? So, why, how, what? This is the essence of Simon Sinek's book. That why is in the center. And it's funny because I'm walking around here yesterday and I'm thinking, well, one, I always make the same jokes, but I don't look very much like a strength coach. You don't think, like I always said, if we're at a gym, you're not asking me questions. Okay, if you don't know me, you walk right by me. And there's a lot of people there's a lot of big ass people here. Looks like, reminds me of the guys that used to be big are small, like a lot of but it looks like the NSCA conference in 1984. And you know why? Because that's what. There's a lot of what. Everybody knows what they want to do. But I don't know if they know why they want to do it. And I'm not so sure if they know how. Based on talking to some people who gave some of the exams, there were some people who didn't know how either. So we're not going to talk very much about how. We're going to talk a lot about what and why, though. Because the controversy is in the why. Why can't we do what we always did? That's the big argument that everybody gets. And Coach was asking me, he said, why haven't you spoken here in a while? And I said, I think I haven't spoken because I say things that aren't popular. I ask a lot of why questions. I ask people to think a lot. And I don't think everybody likes that. You have to ask yourself, are you starting with what? When you think about your program, do you start with what? What do I want to do? I want to do squats. I want to do deadlifts. Or do you start with why? So we're going to go through the whys, okay? Because it's another great book, Creating Magic. Lee Cockrell, it's a guy, he's the executive director of Disney World, I think, one of the Disney properties. But he's a guy who came from being an army cook to being the executive director at Disney World. And it's a really funny book. In the process, got like 2 bottles broken over his head by waiters that he was supervising. And after the second one, his wife said to him, maybe you got to think about your management style a little bit because that's the second guy in 5 years that broke a bottle in your face, right? But really, really good book. But what if the way we've always done it was wrong? What if we weren't right? Let's look at that. This is great. During World War II, just before the Americans entered the war, they were studying the big guns of the Germans. They found they could fire a shell every 10 seconds. The best the Americans could do was one every 30 seconds. They assigned a colonel to study the matter. He found the gunners were told to wait 20 seconds after firing a shell. When he asked why, everyone said, because it's in the manual. Colonel went back to examine the World War I manual. It said, fire the shot, wait 20 seconds. Frustrated, he went back to the Civil War manuals. They said, fire the cannon and wait 20 seconds to steady the horses. Are we steadying the horses? That's the question we have to ask ourselves, right? The fundamental question, and this is page 51 of Start With Why. Why did we start doing what we are doing in the first place? What is our why? Well, one, we'll look at the bigger picture. Why are we strength and conditioning coaches? What's our job? Here's our job. Prevent injuries caused by training. Yes, I am going to cheap shot CrossFit. Sorry, I didn't think I would, but I will. Okay? Prevent injuries caused by training. If people get hurt in your weight room, you stink. Okay? You stink as a strength and conditioning coach. And in college, we get immune to that because we can just send them to the trainer. I'll go to the trainer. Okay? In professional sports, that does not work. People start going down to the trainer and talking to the trainer from getting hurt in the weight room. Somebody above the trainer starts walking upstairs and asking you what the hell you're doing. But in college, you can crunch a bunch of freshmen and it doesn't really matter to too many people. And that's a problem. Look at risk benefit. Then our second job is to prevent injuries in competition. That's our second job. Our third job is to improve performance. It's not our first job, it's our third. Job 1, don't get anybody hurt in your weight room. Job 2, don't get them hurt on the field. Design, develop resilient people. And 3, make them better. That's when we start looking at the why. When we start thinking about why, we got to think about what the goals are. If you get this out of order, you risk having key players miss games. One thing I will tell you, I love this idea, just risk benefit. Risk benefit's a scale. And it's going to vary. It's going to vary depending on sport. It's going to vary depending on salary. It's going to vary depending on age. Okay? When I get major league pitchers that are making an average of $20 million, do you think we Olympic lifted? Absolutely not. Does everybody that I train Olympic lift? Well, up until that point they did. But I was like, if I break one $20 million guy, and all of a sudden I try to explain to somebody, well, I want to see if you can do 300. They're like, what? Paying this guy $20 million to use his hands and his shoulders. What are you doing? Doesn't make any sense, right? The risk benefit does not weigh out because the risk is like $130 million. It's big risk. And it's not enough benefit. Our job is to help the team win. That's our job as a strength and conditioning coach. That's what we're there for. I had a great luck to work for a guy named Jack Parker who was, he's the winningest coach in one sport at one school ever. I think 890 wins, if I'm not mistaken. And whenever I asked him for budget, for stuff, for money, he'd always be like, will you help us win more games? And if I could answer yes to that question, I could have what I wanted. Because that's all he cared about. He wanted to win. We want Kaisers. Will Kaisers help us win more games? Yep. Okay. Then you can get Kaisers. Because he knew what his job was. His job was to win as many of those games as he possibly could. How do teams win? Statistically speaking, by having their best players playing. And again, anyone who's been in professional sport will tell you that. So our job is injury prevention before performance enhancement. Because we need to have the best players in the game in order to have the best chance of winning. That is, it's that way everywhere. But in sports, like I said, basketball, lose your starting center and see what your basketball team looks like. In ice hockey, lose your first line center. Suddenly your second line center is playing first line. Third line center is playing second line. Your fourth best center, a guy who wasn't playing, is playing now. Okay? We lost our first line center one year to a sports hernia, to athletic pubalgia type thing. And we were 500 at the break. I think we were like 10-10 or 9-9 or something like that. Kid came back. We ran off 20-1. Ended up like 30-11, 30-10, whatever it was that year. Because that one guy came back that we really needed. Okay? In NHL, it's man games lost to injury. NFL, it's starters games missed. Baseball, it's disabled list games. But everybody tracks it. Except colleges. So what is our why? To improve player performance while keeping players healthy. That, to me, that's the why. My early experience proved that my early philosophies made these things mutually exclusive. It was really hard for me to train them. I didn't get to the thought process that I'm going to show you today because I wanted to be at this thought process. I got to this thought process because it was the correct answer to the question. At least, again, in my mind. Because this is the evolution of a strength coach, right? We got a lot of stage 1 and 2 guys here this week. We got a lot of guys that look like bodybuilders and powerlifters. Everybody goes through that. One thing you'll notice, again, I'm talking to Coach Williams over here and Coach Oxel. Everybody's a lot smaller than they were 20 years ago. I'm about the same, actually, because I was never very big to begin with. But it makes me less unimpressive as some of these other guys my age start to realize that, one of the things you start to see guys when they get older and they're like, I don't know if all that heavy lifting was all that good an idea, right? You see everybody, Rob was saying yesterday, you see the old timers walking around now and everybody's looking like they need a hip replacement or a knee replacement. So how smart were we, right? You're a bodybuilder. You want to look good. That's how everybody starts. We all start, we want to look good. You want girls to look at you if you're a guy, whatever. And then you realize that, people don't take bodybuilders seriously. So you start powerlifting, Now you're going to show off. Now I'm going to look good and I'm going to be able to move a lot of weight around because that's really important. Then you get your first job, right? But when you get your first job, your what and your how are sometimes determined by what you've been doing before. So we see a lot of bodybuilding, powerlifting looking stuff, right? Then you become the injured powerlifter or the injured Olympic lifter, and then the wheels start to spin. That was me at 22, 23 years old, realizing I was a competitive powerlifter, and I started to realize, man, I'm a mess. I just had shoulder surgery. I got a bad back. I got a bad knee. This is not working for me. And I realized it wasn't working for some of my athletes. So as the evolution of this strength coach, what are my beliefs? What does the science say? Because I'm going to combine two things, what the science says and what my experience told me. Because I think we've got to respect the science. We've got to look at the science. And we've also got to look at experience. And to me, experience are those numbers, those injury numbers. Do I have healthy players? This was a great quote. This was also in Start With Why. I think I'm not better than you guys. I just got to the knowledge first. I don't think I'm that much smarter than somebody, but I do think I've read a lot more than a lot of people. I got to the information sooner. We're going to talk a lot about the information. We're going to talk about the whys, right? Why do we foam roll? Okay, and I won't ask for a show of hands, but if you don't foam roll with every athlete that you deal with, you're out of your mind. Okay? Out of your mind. Like every athlete that you have, the first thing they do when they come in your facility should be foam roll. Because we know that it works. So, but you say, well, why does it work, Mike? Thomas Myers coined these two terms, locked long and locked short. When I sit a lot, when I'm hunched forward a lot, the tissue on the back of me becomes locked long. It becomes more collagenous because of the low-level stretch that it's constantly experiencing. The tissue in the front of me becomes locked short. It also becomes more collagenous, but in a shortened position. Okay, Myers, anatomy trains, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. What's locked long? Creep. I don't have my plastic bag demo here with me, but to imagine creep, imagine putting your hand in a trash bag and just pushing against that trash bag. You don't rip the bag right away. You experience creep. When we sit for longer than 15 minutes, we experience creep, mechanical creep, defined as elongation of tissue beyond its intrinsic extensibility resulting from a constant load over time. You're experiencing creep right now. You will experience creep during this lecture in your glutes, in your lumbar spine, in your traps. Surprisingly, where? In the areas that if you are a foam roller, that you foam roll most frequently. Because to combat creep, we need to stimulate the tissue. And we know this from physical therapy, right? So what do? And I love rolling. One nice thing about group rolling, this is our national team girls in Switzerland in 2010. But we bring bags of rollers everywhere we go. Switzerland, a nice day out, okay, we throw the rollers out on their AstroTurf and everybody rolls. It's no problem. That's my daughter when she was about 10, running around, kicking the soccer ball. But the idea, that's the old guy right there rolling. But we give them the rollers and let them roll for 10, 15 minutes. Because we know that we can change tissue. Again, if you go back, just read the studies. They're in there. We won't spend a lot of time talking about that. Knots, locked short. People say, I got a knot in my muscle, trigger point, whatever. That's the short tissue, the short, more dense tissue. Usually, that tissue's on the front of you. So what I've started to realize almost now is it's almost like you foam roll the back, you stretch the front. It's not quite that simple, but it's pretty darn close. Because people, and we're going to talk about right stretching. Why do we stretch? Or why don't we stretch? More importantly, because again, the old guys that are in here, the 50-plus guys that are around, we've been through the gamut, of where everybody, pre-practice, it was like everybody sat down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? I mean, you did it, I did it, right? Sitting on your ass on the ground. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, no, that's bad for you. It's got to be all dynamic warm-up stuff. We were wrong. You should be on the ground stretching. And you should be rolling, and then you should be stretching, and then you should be doing your dynamic warm-up. We'll talk about why, don't worry, because this is about why. Tightness of the anterior hip structures results in increased compressive loading to the facets during the push-off phase of gait, since the femur cannot be brought back into hyperextension. Therefore, the lower extremity is placed behind the body by extending the pelvis under the lumbar spine. In other words, if I'm too tight in front, I'm going to hurt my back. Okay? Basic fact, mechanical low back pain, Porterfield and DeRosa. Not very open to dispute. I said that already. Why do we stretch? We stretch because the anti-static stretching research is not very compelling. The problem is I was a dumbass, as were very many of you, in terms of somebody said, hey, it's going to reduce your power. And I went, oh, shit, we don't want that to happen. We better not stretch anymore. So for about 10 years, we didn't stretch. But you know what happened is we had this creeping injury epidemic. A lot of low back pain, a lot of shoulder pain, a lot of neck pain. And every time I took somebody to physical therapy, I'd take them to my smart physical therapy friends, they would always be like, his blank is too tight. He needs to stretch it. And I started to realize, gee, the solution to all of my injury problems seems to be stretching. I think we should start doing that again. So we did. We stretch every day. We static stretch every day. Because read those studies. Read all of these studies. Read every one you can get your hands on. It's not compelling. Non-counter movement jump decreased from 21.2 to 20.3. I don't know. Chris Frankel, you in here? Skip my lecture, that bastard. I can't believe I'm going to talk to him. But I sent this study to Chris, because Chris is a research guy, really smart. I said, what do you think about this? You know, they say it's a statistically significant change. He said, yeah, statistically significant, practically insignificant. That's what he sent me back in the email. I was like, that's what I thought. Because when I look at that, that's not a huge difference, particularly when you look at the study design, because the study design was like, hold a stretch for first, do a vertical jump, boom. Walk over, hold a bunch of stretches for 4 minutes, walk back, do another vertical jump. Kevin just laughed, right? Because the conclusion of that was that static stretching will decrease your vertical jump. It was like, no shit, Sherlock. Did anybody not think that was going to happen? What does that have to do with that? I'm never going to stretch again because of that? Because and then they did some later studies. I wish I had the study reference up there. But all of a sudden, that guy, like, he jumps around a little bit. He moves around. He gets back on. He does his vertical jump. Guess what? It's all back. It wasn't gone forever. It was a fleeting decrease in power from a 4-minute static stretch. We got to read the research when we start changing what we're going to do. But we didn't, and I did. I'm guilty. 10 years, no static stretching. Nothing but dynamic warm-up. And then thank God, enough knocks to the head with physical therapists saying, man, his hamstrings are too tight, his hip flexors are too tight, you know, his internal rotators are too tight. It's like, shit, we should stretch more, huh? Because we know now that the results of these type of things are washed away by dynamic warm-up. So if we simply have a sequence, we're going to talk about that sequence, we're fine. So in this case, we threw out the baby with the bathwater. Do you know where that comes from? Anybody? Baby's got the last bath. So they always said sometimes the baby could fall in the water and they'd get dumped out. It's actually true. Just so you, a little learning for you guys while you're here. Be able to reference that. But stretching is not warm-up. Stretching is long-term injury prevention that needs to be done every day. And it needs to be done at the beginning of the workout. Because by the end of the workout, you're too warmed up. You're too flexible. That's not the time. You can't change tissue. The other thing, think about this. How many people here think we stretch muscles? It's a trick question. Please don't put your hand up. We don't stretch muscles. Never. Again, one of my brilliant physical therapist friends told me, he said, muscles are about 300 times more extensible than the fascia that contains them. He said, so when we're stretching, we are not stretching muscles. We are probably manipulating fascia. And that's very, very different. You get different types of fascia. So, you know, we're not even, all we want to do with stretching is not get shorter. Because we're really not going to get that much longer. But as long as we don't get shorter, we're going to be okay. Do I know this works? This is what I say to people, like, I don't know. 780 man games for our college hockey team per season. We averaged about 4 games missed with muscle pulls. Okay? Very, very low. Pre-Olympic tour 2013, we had 0 games missed with muscle strains. None. We didn't have a pulled groin. We didn't have a pulled hamstring. We didn't have anybody not playing a game because they pulled a muscle. And we static stretch. This is what I understand. We static stretch every single solitary day. We foam roll every single solitary day. Same thing. So why? Olympic lifting. I love Olympic lifting. I can't tell you, if you go on our YouTube page, you'll read some incredible comments about what a moron I am. How I don't know anything about Olympic lifting, how I don't know how to coach Olympic lifting. Because we always Olympic lift from the hang, never from the floor. And our athletes all rock when they lift. And people are always like, that's wrong. Right? Why from the hang? The reason I tell people, because plate diameter is a constant and people are not. That plate's going to be the same diameter all the time, which means some people are going to have a very big advantage when we Olympic lift from the floor. Some people are going to have a very big disadvantage. You know who's going to have a big disadvantage? The tall people. Okay? So your offensive tackles, your basketball forwards and centers, your rowers. Lots of those people are going to struggle to address the bar in that low position because it's constant. That's why we get blocks. That's why people, block and play around and try to do all this stuff. We just have always gone. 30 years, we've just gone from hang position above the knees. We've never done anything other than that. Because look at this, right? From the hang, all men and women are created equal. Everybody's the same here. I can teach everybody exactly the same thing from that position. I cannot do that off the floor. Watch Carolyn. Carolyn's 4'10", 65 pounds. She's a pretty damn good Olympic lifter for a 12-year-old girl. She can clean her body weight for a couple of reps. Right? She'd probably be an okay Olympic lifter from the floor, to be honest, because she's 4'10". One thing you notice, go to an Olympic lifting meet. You won't see any tall people. It's really true, right? This is Max Lane. He used to play for the Patriots. He's 6'8", about 315. Okay, if he tries to get that bar on the floor, he's going to really struggle. His back position is going to be problematic. He might get hurt. So when I think about what I'm trying to do and why I'm trying to do it, I'm always saying, I don't want anybody to get hurt. So I'm going to do everything within my power to limit the things that I think might get somebody hurt. Yet I want to do everything within my power to try to get everybody as good as I possibly can. Because we're back on that scale, that risk-benefit scale. And we've got to realize, risk-benefit, freshman football players may be different than professional baseball pitchers. Why do we rock? People, you're not supposed to rock. I studied Olympic lifting. I've studied Olympic lifting my whole life. And one thing that you read, if you know Olympic lifting and you know vertical jump mechanics, go back and I went and found Carl Miller's Olympic lifting manual. I actually bought it off of Amazon. I probably paid about $50 for it because I wanted his talk about double knee bend. Because in good Olympic lifting, there is double knee bend. There is extension, flexion, extension. There's rock. Just like in a vertical jump. When you tell somebody to jump, what do? They extend, flex, extend. Everybody does it. Every person who's trying to produce the most power they can rocks. And it's too bad. I was hoping Chris Doyle would be here today because it's during his tenure. I was actually Chris's college strength coach too. And one time I knuckled under because I kept getting all shit from all these other strength coaches about, Rocky, it's wrong. So one day I said, okay, no more counter movement. Everybody's got to clean from the hang. And when I say from the hang, it means you can't move. If you move, you're not going to count the lift. I had a bunch of guys go down 30, 40 pounds in the clean. And one of the kids who's now an ATF agent, really funny guy, he walks up to me. He's like, I have to paraphrase because he called me a very good name. He was like, you're a real good effing strength coach. He said, you managed to make my clean go down 40 pounds. Nice job. And he walked out of the room, and I was like, he's right. He cleaned 370 from the hang, and he just cleaned 330 with this non-counter movement style that I wanted. I proceeded to make this guy at least 10% weaker with my brilliance. Next time around, I was like, you know something? Nope, we're going to rock, we're going to scoop, whatever the hell you want to call it, we're going to do it. Extension, flexion, extension. Watch some Olympic lifting tape. You'll see it. It's there. It's always there. Right? And why do we clean? This is my daughter. 14 years old, I think, in this video, maybe. That's 140 pounds for 6. And it's, again, people they see the YouTube video, and they're like, her technique's awful. She's flopping all over the place. Hey, I'm trying to get her faster. I'm trying to improve her vertical jump. I'm not trying to win some clean, look good contest. I always say, if it looks athletic, if the catch looks good, I'm fine. But everybody who comes in will be like, oh, they're weird. They do funny stuff, right? But then, now here's the big one. This is, hopefully we got plenty of time to hit this. Why unilateral training, right? Because this is the one that got me in the most trouble. And I didn't, is Jeff Oliver, did he come too, or did he blow me off too? All my friends, these guys, right? Oh, you did? Okay, good, thank you. You weren't going to say anything, though, until you realized I'd be mad at you. But Jeff and I had a conversation, which he does not remember. He said, I don't remember ever having this conversation, but we had this conversation. He said, would you stop squatting if you could figure out a way to test a one-leg squat? I said, yes, I would. But I haven't figured that out yet at that time. And then we started playing around with some of this unilateral stuff, testing that we're seeing. And when I realized, okay, I can do that. We're in the right situation. Why unilateral training? Why can't we do what we always did, right? Strength Magazine, 1920. Friend of mine, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. A friend of mine bought this for me as a gift, just kind of as a joke. He was at an old bookstore and he found these strength magazines. The first one I open up has this picture in it. Right at the time we're doing all this talking about unilateral training. And it says, actually, I gotta see if I can, because I want to read it accurately. The top left, which you can't read, says squatting on one leg will do more for you than squatting on two. That was 1920. In the bottom right, that picture of the back squat, it says a variation of the exercise pictured above. Right? Wait 20 seconds and steady the horses. Right? Why do we back squat? Because it's the king of all exercises, because real men do it. Well, that's a shitty answer. That's not a really good why. I mean, why do we do it? Well, you know why we do it? And the older people will tell you. We do it because of the wide world of sports. You know, because powerlifting was on, believe it or not, when I was a kid, powerlifting was on TV. You could watch the World Powerlifting Championships on TV. You could watch Olympic lifting on TV, on Wide World of Sports. You know, and that's what we were exposed to, right? That's what everybody did. And I was like everybody else, but I started looking and thinking, is that right? Go to this link. I'm not going to click it because I'm not sure what will happen. It's great why everyone shouldn't squat. It's amazing. You should look at the different, you know, we get all this FAI and all this stuff that's going on. When you look at the different hips that they show you in this article, you'll be shocked. Because it's one of those things that you realize, you know, you got a guy who says, man, you know, it really pinches when I squat. And you say, okay, do a split squat. And he's like, nope, that doesn't hurt at all. He's got one of those funky hips. We don't all, I mean, hips, it would be nice to think that anatomy is a constant. Anatomy is not a constant, not even close. And anatomy is very, you know, race-specific and region-specific, developmentally based on what people did. Were they squatters? Were they workers? What, you know, what did they do? And then think about science. What do we know? What do we know are the enemies of the back? Inflexibility is a big enemy of the back. Torque, rotating around, that's a big enemy of the back. Back does not like that. Shear, getting that weight out in front of you, like back does not like that either, right? Compression, 600, 700, 800 pounds on your spine. And again, I competed in powerlifting, so I'm, you know, it's not like I just, you know, people think I'm like Richard Simmons, you know, I'm up here, I'm like with a headband and leg warmers on. You know, I did all this stuff. And I got the back to prove it, and I got the shoulders to prove it. And trust me, it's not fun at 55. You may think it's a big joke. Now, I can remember, we used to jump off the loading docks all the time. I'd work for my brother driving a truck. I always jump off the I'd be like, depth jump, like off loading docks this high, and the old guys would be like, don't do that. Are you kidding me? I can squat 500 pounds. I'm fine. 3 knee surgeries later, you know, I get up, and I'm like, I think about those old guys all the time. I'm like, shit, I should have listened to those old guys. They knew what they were talking about. Don't jump off the loading dock like that. It is not a good idea. Torque and shear. These are just a graph. I forget the name of the study, but they show you, just as an aside, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about. The top spinal force, look at that. Lifting dumbbells in a seated position. Just, if you have athletes with back pain, don't let them lift dumbbells. Because the worst thing someone with back pain can do, if you look at those studies, is pick up heavy dumbbells. And sometimes we think, you know, like if I've got an athlete who's got a back problem, I'm going to have them bench and I'm going to have them do push-ups. But I'm not going to have them do heavy dumbbell exercises. Because trying to get the worst thing he can do is try to get those dumbbells in position. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it's there on the thing. Why is inflexibility, right? Floor slides. What happens if I can't externally rotate to get my hands under the bar? This was one of these things, just one day, again, whack up the side of the head, right? You know, I used to always think, why do you have some guys who squat absolutely perfect and still come out and go, man, that hurts my back? Because if I can't externally rotate, I will lumbar extend. I will jam up my facets, and I will look perfect. I'll have a really good looking squat, but I'll be that guy who walks around like this after, like, man. You know, and most of your athletes, I'll be honest with you, most of your athletes, they're not babies. If they're telling you it hurts their back, it probably hurts their back. You will have a few, trust me, and when they see the alternative, sometimes they'll realize the alternative wasn't really that good, because it's actually harder. The nice thing about, we started talking about unilateral training, right? In unilateral training, there's a lot more balance component. And so a lot of times, sometimes when I argue with an old timer who's like, you know, oh, you don't need to do that, I'll say, well, why don't you use machines? Because, you know, free weights, man, you get balance, stability. You know, you've got to control the weight. And I'm like, well, that's my argument for unilateral training. Why? How can you argue for not using machines and then against unilateral training at the same time? Because it's the exact same premise. Why don't we do bilateral training? You know, which looks more like running? One looks like standing still, one looks like running, right? Why? And what we realize when I do this, as soon as I take my foot off the ground, the way my anatomy function changes, or the way my anatomy functions changes. Suddenly, my gluteus medius is a stabilizer. Suddenly, my adductor is a stabilizer. Suddenly, my quadratus lumborum is a stabilizer. When I do unilateral training, my pelvis behaves differently. It behaves much more like the way it behaves when we're in motion. Put another one in the unilateral training column for me, right, as far as I'm concerned. Bilateral deficit. This is the biggest point of this whole thing in my mind. And this, again, talk about stuff that, you know, I said when training is like archaeology. Sometimes you find old stuff that was there for a long time. This bilateral deficit stuff has been around. I think it's in the Comey book. That, again, probably 15 years old, that green book. But bilateral limb deficit describes difference in maximal and near maximal force generating capacity of the muscles when they are contracted alone or in combination with the contralateral muscles. A deficit occurs when the summed unilateral force is greater than the bilateral force. In other words, the simplest demonstration of bilateral deficit is hand grip dynamometry. If I squeeze with two hands, let's say I get a score of 200. If I squeeze right, I'll probably squeeze 120. If I squeeze left, I'll probably squeeze 120. My combined score will be 240, giving me a bilateral deficit of 40. The bilateral deficit absolutely positively exists in lower body training. We can proportionately use heavier loads when we train unilaterally. And we'll show you this, and you'll see it on video. It's kind of hard to dispute. This is another one when people say, so this is Megan Duggan, who's our Olympic captain. And because we've been playing with this stuff, we had to jury rig this a little bit. She's on a 6-inch box because we want a fairly close to parallel squat position. She's got 80-pound kettlebells in her hands. So that's 160 pounds. She cannot squat 300 pounds once. When I tested my Boston University hockey guys, their split squat equaled their front squat in every single guy within 5 pounds. That's a pretty large bilateral deficit. We had kids that could front squat 300 pounds and kids that could split squat 300 pounds. What does that tell you? How strong? This is Ben Bruno. Ben used to work for me. He's a great guy. He's a personal trainer now in California, and he's probably one of the strongest people I've ever seen pound for pound. That's 305 pounds total that he's got on right now. He weighs about 180. He's got like 85 or 90-pound dumbbells in every weight vest that we had in the place. But the total weight was 305 pounds. He does 305 for 6. He's had major back surgery, and he's able to very easily handle these really heavy unilateral loads. This is the most compelling one because what people, when they see, this is Max Shank, who, again, one of the strongest people I've ever seen pound for pound. This is 315 pounds. He's 160, I think, give or take. So after Max did, well, I'll let him finish here. So after Max finished, sorry, I'm going to stop that. Don't read this next slide, but actually, I don't want to. I got to see if I can pause this. I actually called him up and asked him what his best deadlift was. 585. 585 single. 315 for 5, which if we use our percentage chart, maybe 340 single. If we double 340, 680. It's a pretty big bilateral deficit. Over 100 pounds. Over 20%. Okay? And it exists. It's there. It's there if you look for it. It's there if you take the time to look for it. We did it with our hockey girls with vertical jumps. We measured standing vertical jump, right leg, left leg. 28 out of 29 had a bilateral deficit. The combined right plus left was higher. Strangely, the highest, we had one girl at 29-inch vertical jump who was 29 combined. Everybody else, but some, again, were as much as 20% higher. The idea with the bilateral deficit is that the body finds bilateral exercise neurologically confusing. You're not made to do things like this. You're made to do things like this. You know, that's why if you ask somebody to run and jump, touch the rim, very few people will run up to it and two-leg jump off, right? Anybody? Dwayne was a great jumper. And I guarantee you his his approach jump probably went 10 inches higher than his standing vertical. We would see some basketball guys with, people, they only got a 30-inch vertical jump. And then you give them a run-up, and they got a 40-inch vertical jump. The body finds bilateral exercise neurologically confusing. And you can look this up. I'm not making stuff up. This is in the research. There's a reason we're right-handed. I just had fillings done the other day on the right side of my mouth. You know what I realized? Never knew it, never thought about it. I eat righty, and I don't eat lefty very well. Trying to chew my food on the left side of my mouth, and then I wonder, well, why do I got cavities on the right side? Because that's where I chew my food. We are handed and sided for a reason. It's the way to be most efficient. And then we'll talk, last two things we're going to talk about. Core. Why do we do our core? Why do we do what we do? Anti-rotation. Weakness of the abdominal wall results in an increase in the anterior rotary motion of the pelvis. The motion increases extension and compressive loading of the facets. In other words, if the front of me is weak, it's going to make my back hurt again. And that's not going to get better by crunching. Because these muscles are not flexors, right? They don't do this. If you think about functional anatomy, your abdominal muscles clearly are not flexors. They're anti-extension muscles anteriorly. They're anti-lateral flexors. They're anti-rotators. That's what their job is. That's what they're designed to do. They're not designed for motion. They're designed for prevention of motion. We say with core stuff, why don't all the smart people agree? I think the smart people don't all agree in the core world because everybody wants to be the guy. Everybody wants to be the expert, so they all disagree with each other almost on purpose. What I've tried to do is listen to the PRI guys and listen to Hodges and listen to Stuart McGill, listen to everybody that's smart when it comes to low back pain and core training and pull all that stuff together. But when you pull it all together, you don't see Russian twists and crunches and leg lifts. We literally, I see people do that stuff and I laugh. I'm like, are you serious? When was the last time you cracked a book? We have not done anything that looks like that stuff. Now, I'd say we're going on a decade of not doing any of it. Because core training is really a process of neuromuscular re-education. You're trying to teach those muscles. Shirley Sarman talks about getting the right muscle to move the right joint at the right time. Or, in this case, maybe getting the right muscle to stabilize the right joint at the right time. For a lot of our core training things, you might look at some things, they go, these little activation exercises, these little, whatever, Jane Fonda's, they all got a purpose if they're done right. And they're a waste of time if they're done wrong. But the whole idea, whenever I move my arm or my leg, the purpose of those movements is to perturb my core, to try to cause something to happen, which I'm trying to prevent. We don't want to make something happen. We want to make something not happen. We want to use those muscles as stabilizers. And this is really important. Stanley Paris, brilliant. Pain never precedes dysfunction. This guy was probably the father of physical therapy. Think about that for a second. Pain never precedes dysfunction. By the time someone comes into you and says, my blank hurts, my knee, my shoulder, my back, my neck, something's been wrong for a while. There's dysfunction there. And we've been, as Gray Cook likes to say, our job in the 80s was to add strength to dysfunction. That's what we did. It was like, hey, that was an ugly 500 squat. That was horrible. Can you do 510? Try it. Let's slap it on there. Right? That was my job. That's what I did. I was to add strength to dysfunctioner for a living. It's like, are you serious? But I did it because I thought that's what we were supposed to do. And then you stop. You only stop when, that was too ugly. Okay. Yep, you went over the too ugly line. We're done. But semi-ugly was like, semi-ugly, we'll give you one more and see if we can get to really bad ugly so we can get it up on the board. Perfect. I haven't had boards in a long time either. Again, boards reward genetics. I used to have my college guys who'd come in. It's not bad in college football because you got all fast twitch freaks, especially in Division I college football. But when you're a 1AA strength coach like I was, guys would come in and they'd be pissed. They'd be like, he doesn't do shit. And I'm like, I know, but he's 90% fast twitch fiber. What am I going to tell you? He always wins all these tests. He has the highest vertical, and he has the highest clean, and he has the highest bench, and he has the highest squat because he's 90% fast twitch fiber. You're like 40. You're a walk-on offensive lineman. That's what you are. And unfortunately, I can't do anything about that. I'll work really hard with you, but I can't give you what that kid got, handed to him at birth. 2 things we need to avoid in core training. Repeat flexion. Yes, don't say, yeah, I know you got to be able to move your spine. I get it. That's not 100 crunches, 1,000 crunches. McGill's research shows you want to blow up a spine, you put it in a little machine. They take a pig spine, they put it in a little crunch machine like this. And they just let it cycle. And then they figure out how many cycles do the discs blow up. Okay? Again, I'm not the smartest guy in this room, but that was fairly compelling evidence to me that we weren't going to do any more crunches. He uses crunches to blow the discs up. That's his mechanism to blow the disc up. Okay, we'll eliminate that. The other thing we did is attempting to increase rotational range of motion. We stopped. Oh, actually, we're going to go back and then go forward. We stopped doing all this stuff. Don't do this. This is bad for people. And people go, what are you talking about? We do this all the time. I'm just telling you, it's bad for people. All of these are bad for people. Scorpions are bad for people. Leg overs, all this stuff. Your lumbar spine is not meant to move like this. It's designed to be stable. It's a stack of vertebrae with very little motion capability designed for stability. Go back to this quote. Rotation of the lumbar spine is more dangerous than beneficial, and rotation of the pelvis and lower extremities to one side while the trunk remains stable or is rotated to the other side is particularly dangerous. Shirley Sarman, page 72, Diagnosis and Treatment of Movement Impairment Syndromes. What is this? Rotation of the pelvis while the upper extremity is held stable. She declared that to be particularly dangerous. Not just dangerous, particularly dangerous. Okay? It's a bad idea. Ask yourself why. Ask myself, why do I do that? You know why I did it? Because I saw someone else do it. Because it looked cool and I thought I'd add it to my warm-up. That's God's honest reason why it was in our warm-up. I saw it in another warm-up, track warm-up. I was like, yeah, we should do some more like spine stuff. Doing spine stuff is like doing freaking knee mobility. We got to do a little more MCL stuff, try to get that thing loosened up a little bit. It's just as stupid because those joints are designed. It's good. I'm glad you're laughing. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm here all week. But it is. It's like knee mobility exercises, right? We know that's not good. Spine mobility exercises are not good. It's just facts. And again, handedness. I'm a righty. Have you noticed that? I'm really trying to come over here and look at this side, but I'm not a lefty. It's reality. During most activities, the primary role of the abdominal muscles is to provide isometric support and to limit the degree of rotation in the trunk, which, as discussed, is limited in the lumbar spine. This is what the muscles do. So we got to train the muscles to do what the muscles do. Prevent motion. Again, if you're walking around like this, you don't have real good anti-extension capability. And you see that. A lot of athletes don't have real good anti-extension capability. And sometimes I think, well, yeah, they're really good athletes. Well, we could still tighten that front up a little bit and take a little bit of that pelvic tilt out. They probably feel better. Because one thing you notice, most of those athletes, especially like your big-ass linemen, they're always like, man, my back hurts. And you're like, yeah, because your pelvis is just way out of position. You shouldn't be like that. But it does help you run fast and jump high and push people on the ground. But we still might want to correct that just a hair. So rather than considering the abdominals as flexors and rotators of the trunk, for which they certainly have the capacity, their function might be better viewed as anti-rotators and anti-lateral flexors of the trunk. This was what changed. When I read this quote, I was like, It's one thing, Rob, right? Cheating. Okay, if you learn nothing else, right? In school we were taught cheating is bad. Cheating is really, really good. Okay? And the better you cheat, the better you'll coach. Steal as much shit as you possibly can from people smarter than you. Because again, if cheating, right? If you went to school, if we're lined up like this and we're taking a test, if you want to cheat, do you sit behind a dumb guy? Oh, he's a dumbass. I'll sit behind him, copy his answers so I can get a 50 like he will. Right? No. You sit behind a smart guy. Same deal. Porterfield DeRosa, pretty smart guys. Stuart McGill, pretty smart guy. Shirley Sarman, very, very smart woman, really smart woman. She's about this big, tiny. So I took a picture. I don't used to take pictures of people. I was like, I want to take a picture with you. She's like, looking at me. She goes, I don't even understand why you know me. And I was like, you've revolutionized strength and conditioning. And she's like, how did I do that? And I was like, well, by writing your book. She's 70-something years old. Lumbar rotation, the overall range of lumbar rotation is approximately 13 degrees. The rotation between each segment from T10 to L5 is 2 degrees. The greatest rotational range is between L5 and S1, which is 5 degrees. The thoracic spine, not the lumbar spine, should be the site of the greatest amount of rotation of the trunk. When an individual practices rotational exercises, he should be instructed to think about the motion occurring at the chest. Very, very important. This is the one I love. People say, like, that's all bullshit. Mark Ripto wrote a brilliant article about that the other day, as a matter of fact. Unbelievable. But, if you can squat and deadlift big weights, you don't need core training. Again, so because you can do something in bilateral stance, those unilateral stance muscles will work better. Not true. If you can squat and deadlift big weights, you can squat and deadlift big weights. That's, I guess, if that was your goal, that's perfect. If you're entering a powerlifting meet, that's really good. If you're trying to play your sport and you're not better at your sport and you're not running faster and you're not jumping higher, then it's a waste of time. Because again, the outcome is what we're looking for. I'm not going to talk too much about PRI except for the fact that it's very interesting. I only got like three or 4 minutes and I got a couple more things I got to hit. But if you get a chance, look at the Postural Restoration Institute stuff. Look at some of the stuff on breathing. It's really, Tim was talking about breathing stuff this morning. I'm just going to tell you, we're doing a lot more breathing. And, again, people are like, breathing. Oh, yeah, now he's a yoga guy. I apologize to all the yoga people that I insulted in previous talks. I was wrong. Breathing is really important. And again, think about breathing being important, right? How long can we live without food? Quite a while, right? A couple weeks. I think it's like 7 days with no water. No air? You're in the minutes, folks. It's really important. And our ability to do it, our ability to breathe in through our nose, to exhale out our mouth, that's all in there. There's tons of research talking about nasal breathing, talking about pursed lips exhales, talking about how that relates to core training, talking about how the diaphragm works. Read this, Google value of blowing up a balloon and do the exercise that they tell you to do. It's all in your notes anyway. Watch that diaphragm example and learn how the diaphragm works. It's really important. I'm rushing a little bit. I apologize, but I got 2 minutes. This is the 2-minute warning. And again, parasympathetic, sympathetic. I didn't pay any attention in school to this stuff because I didn't think it was going to matter. It matters. Breathing matters. My neck pain is gone, just from breathing. Breathing and floor slide breathing. And like my neck, I feel like I'm 20 years old again. And I didn't feel that way a year ago. Trust me. I got to jump through this. It's all in there. Again, this is at floor. This is like one of our base breathing drills. Because here, it's a scap stability drill. It's an external rotator warm up. It's an internal rotator stretch. And we're trying to get him when you breathe. And I don't know if we zoom in on this one, but no, we don't. What I want is I tell him I want like shrink wrap in your abdominals. Because your abdominals are how you exhale. Your deep abdominal muscles are what cause you to exhale. If you sit and try to blow out for 10 seconds, you'll see how your abdominal, that's what that value of blowing up a balloon article is all about. So last thing, why we pull heavy. I think your bench 1 RM should equal your chin up RM. 1 RM should equal your hang clean 1 RM should equal your split squat 1 RM. That to me, that's a good athlete when I get someone who can do all that. Chin up 1 RM is load on the dip belt plus your body weight. If you can bench 300, you should be able to chin 300, which means if you weigh 200, you should be able to do 1 chin up with 100 pounds around your waist. Okay, all of our athletes can do that. Watch Kendall. This is Kendall Coyne, he plays at Northeastern University, one of our top USA players. And it's like I said, gets a little ugly, little kick, but she's going to go for 5 because it's test day, which is all right with me. I don't mind a little effort. 45 for 5, 125-pound female. This is Ed Lippy, one of our, actually now he's a personal trainer, strength coach, but this was when he was training a little bit heavier. 135 for 3. If you want to prevent shoulder injuries, pull heavy. This was, again, talk about you looking at your injury stats. When we had all these shoulder surgeries, all these shoulder things going on, I started looking and saying, we don't pull enough. I was watching guys today and did lat pull downs. I was like, wow. I'm going to say, don't see a lot of lat pull downs these days, but, anybody, like I said, our girls, our average Olympian can do 25 for 5, 25 pounds for 5 reps. That was our team average. Kendall was the best at 45. We didn't have anybody I don't think we had anybody under 10 on the Olympic team with body weight. Because it's kind of, books, we talked about this, I'm almost done. Start with Why, Simon Sinek, Made to Stick by Jim Collins, Creating Magic, Lee Cockrell, Never Eat Alone, Keith Ferrazzi, First Break All the Rules, Marcus Buckingham, The Slight Edge, unbelievable book. Jeff Olson, Anatomy Trains, Thomas Myers. This again, get an Amazon account. If you haven't done it, do it today. Go on Amazon, open up an account for yourself so every time someone tells you a good book, you can order it. If you're a listener, order the audio. I don't care. Something I don't like to read. Get the audio book. There's so much stuff out there for you. This stuff, if you like it, it's all on this Functional Strength Coach 5. I'm not going to try to sell you anything. What I hope I can get you to think about, and some of you may walk out of here and like, I hate that guy. That's okay. I'm good with that. Not a problem. What you'll realize if you sit down and talk to me, I'm not a bad guy. I just have ideas, things that I believe in. But most importantly, I hope you will start to examine your whys. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Sit down with your program, look at every exercise and say, why do I do that? Why do I do that? Why do I do that? If I got that out of you today, I succeeded. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it.